The wind howled across the barren plains of West Texas, carrying with it the dust of 1,000 failed dreams. Eliza Carr stood on the weathered porch of her family homestead, her calloused hands gripping a cup of bitter coffee as she watched the sun climb over the horizon. At 27, she had the lean strength of a woman who'd worked the land since childhood, her auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun, revealing a face marked by sun and determination. The ranch sprawled before her, 160 acres of stubborn soil that had been in her family for 30 years. Her father, Samuel Carr, had claimed it when Texas was still finding its feet as a state, fighting off Comanche raids and drought with equal ferocity. Now he lay buried on the hill behind the house, his grave marked by a simple wooden cross that Eliza tended every Sunday. She'd been alone for 6 months now, ever since the fever took him. The neighbors had expected her to sell, to take what money she could get and head east to find a husband in some civilized town. But Eliza had other plans. This land was her blood, her breath, her very soul. She'd die before she'd let it go. The morning routine began as it always did. First, she checked on the chickens. Their numbers dwindled to just 8 hens and 1 ornery rooster. The coop needed repairs, another task added to her endless list. Next came the horses, her father's old bay gelding, Moses, and her own mare, Buttercup. They nickered softly as she approached with their feed, meager portions that made her heart ache. The cattle were the real problem. What had once been a respectable herd of 50 head had shrunk to 23, and those that remained were thin, their ribs showing through dusty hides. The drought of the previous summer had burned away most of the grass, and she couldn't afford to buy feed. She'd already sold her mother's silver candlesticks and her grandmother's pearl necklace just to keep the animals alive through winter. As she walked the fence line, checking for breaks, the weight of her situation pressed down like a physical thing. The early morning light revealed the truth she tried to ignore. Broken posts leaning at drunken angles, wire rusted and sagging, the water tank more patches than original metal. Everything needed fixing, and fixing required money she didn't have. Back at the house, she allowed herself a moment to sit at the kitchen table, spreading out the papers that haunted her dreams. Bank notices, each one more urgent than the last. The mortgage payment was 3 months overdue. Mr. Jameson at the Cattleman's Bank had been patient, knowing her father, but patience had limits. The latest letter, dated 2 weeks prior, used words like final notice and foreclosure proceedings. A dust cloud on the horizon caught her attention. Rider coming. She knew that gait, Harold Whimsy, the bank's messenger boy grown into a man who took too much pleasure in delivering bad news. Eliza smoothed her worn calico dress and stepped onto the porch. Chin raised. "Morning, Miss Carr," Whimsy called out, not bothering to dismount. He had a face like a ferret, all sharp angles and darting eyes. "Mr. Whimsy." She kept her voice level, though her heart hammered against her ribs. He pulled an envelope from his vest pocket, holding it out like it might bite. "From Mr. Jameson. He said to tell you he needs an answer by week's end." Eliza took the letter without breaking eye contact. "Tell Mr. Jameson I appreciate his correspondence." Whimsy's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "You know, Silas Crane was in the bank yesterday, mentioned he might be interested in expanding his holdings if certain properties became available." The name sent ice through her veins. Crane owned the Double Bar Ranch that bordered her land to the east, 8,000 acres and growing. He'd tried to buy her father out twice, and both times Samuel Carr had run him off with a shotgun. "That's so," she kept her voice mild. "Said he'd pay cash, enough to set you up nice in town, maybe even enough for a trip back east. Find yourself a husband." His eyes traveled over her in a way that made her skin crawl. Woman your age, living alone, ain't natural. Thank you for the delivery, Mr. Whimsy. I believe you know the way back to town. He lingered, clearly hoping for more reaction. When none came, he wheeled his horse around with unnecessary force. Week's end, Miss Carr. Mr. Jameson was real clear about that. She waited until the dust from his departure settled before opening the letter. The words swam before her eyes. Regret to inform. Immediate payment of full balance. Forced to proceed with foreclosure. The amount made her knees weak. $600. It might as well have been 6,000. She'd need to sell every animal on the place and it still wouldn't be enough. Inside, she sank into her father's old leather chair. The letter crumpled in her fist. The house felt too quiet, too empty. She could almost hear her father's voice. Cars don't quit, Lizzie. We might bend, but we don't break. But how could she fight this? The land was dying. The bank was calling in its marker, and Silas Crane circled like a vulture. She was one woman against forces that had crushed stronger souls than hers. A knock at the door interrupted her despair. Hope flared. Maybe Whimsy had returned with news of an extension. But the knock came again, different from Whimsy's impatient rapping. This was solid, measured, the knock of someone who expected to be answered but wouldn't demand it. She opened the door to find her father's friend, Thomas McKinnon, hat in hand. The old man looked frailer than she remembered, his clothes hanging loose on a frame that had once been robust. Uncle Thomas. She used the childhood name, though they shared no blood. Come in, please. He shuffled inside, pausing to catch his breath. Lizzie, girl, I heard about the bank notice. News travels fast. Always does when vultures smell a feast. He settled into a kitchen chair with a grateful sigh. Your daddy would be spinning in his grave if he knew Crane was sniffing around. Papa's not here to stop him. Thomas studied her with eyes that had seen too much. Maybe not. But there might be another way. Unless you've got $600 hidden in your boots, I don't see one. Not money, but maybe something better. He leaned forward. You remember I went to that cattle drive to Kansas last spring? Met a fellow there, Caleb Holt. Best ranch foreman I ever saw. Turned the Rocking J from a 2-bit operation into the finest spread in Texas. I'm happy for the Rocking J, but I fail to see. He's looking for a place to settle. Man like that, he could turn this ranch around and make it profitable again. Eliza's jaw tightened. I don't need a man to save me, Uncle Thomas. Not saving, partnering. Think about it, Lizzie. You've got land but no money. He's got skills and some capital saved up. Could be a business arrangement. And what would people say? An unmarried woman taking in a male partner? Thomas shifted uncomfortably. Well, that's the thing. Might be it wouldn't have to stay a business arrangement. Man needs a wife, woman needs a husband. It's the way of things out here. The suggestion hung in the air like smoke. Eliza stood abruptly, busying herself with the coffee pot to hide her reaction. Marriage to a stranger. It went against everything she believed about love, about choice, about independence. I won't sell myself to save the land. Nobody's talking about selling. I'm talking about surviving. Thomas struggled to his feet. I sent word to him already. He'll be by this afternoon. Just meet him. Lizzie. That's all I ask. You had no right. I had every right. I promised your daddy I'd look after you. His voice broke slightly. I'm dying, girl. Doc says I got maybe 6 months. I need to know you'll be safe before I go. The fight went out of her. How could she rage against a dying man's wishes? I'll meet him. But I promise nothing more. Thomas patted her shoulder. That's my girl. You'll see. Caleb Holt's a good man. The kind your daddy would have approved of after he left. Eliza stood in the doorway, looking out at her land. The sun climbed higher, revealing every flaw, every failure. Somewhere out there, a stranger was riding toward her, carrying either salvation or another kind of doom. She wondered which would be worse, losing the land to the bank or keeping it through a marriage built on necessity rather than love. The wind picked up again, and she thought she could hear her father's laughter in it, gentle and knowing. "Life ain't about the cards you're dealt, Lizzie," he used to say. "It's about how you play them." She squared her shoulders and went inside to prepare for whatever came next. Cars didn't quit, even when the only choice left was one they'd never wanted to make. The afternoon sun hung low and heavy when the rider appeared on the horizon. Eliza had been mending a harness on the porch, her fingers working automatically while her mind churned through columns of figures that never added up to salvation. She changed into her better dress, the blue calico with tiny flowers that her mother had sewn, then changed back to her work clothes, refusing to primp for a stranger. Now she wished she'd kept the nicer dress on, if only to feel less like a dusty scarecrow. The man rode a black stallion that moved with the controlled power of prime horseflesh. Even from a distance, she could tell this was no ordinary drifter. He sat his saddle with the easy confidence of someone born to it, his broad shoulders throwing a long shadow across the yellowed grass. As he drew closer, Eliza's breath caught. Thomas had failed to mention that Caleb Holt was a giant of a man, 6.5 feet at least, with shoulders that strained the seams of his white cotton shirt. His face was weathered but not old, maybe 35, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days' growth of beard. Dark hair curled from beneath a worn Stetson, and his eyes, Lord help her, his eyes were the color of prairie sky just before a storm. He dismounted with surprising grace for such a large man, removing his hat as he approached the porch. "Miss Carr, I'm Caleb Holt. Thomas McKinnon said you might be expecting me." His voice was deep, rumbling up from his chest like distant thunder. Eliza found herself gripping the harness leather tight enough to leave marks. "Mr. Holt," she nodded but didn't rise. "Uncle Thomas mentioned you might stop by." He stood there a moment, hat in hand, and she could see him taking in everything: the sagging fence, the peeling paint on the house, the gaunt look of the horses in the corral. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "Ma'am, I've ridden a long way and I believe in speaking plain." He stepped closer to the porch and she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. "Thomas told me about your situation. I'm here with a proposition that might benefit us both." "Is that so?" She kept her voice cool, though her heart was racing. "And what kind of proposition might that be?" He set his hat on the porch rail and looked her straight in the eye. "I was told you're alone here, trying to hold on to your land. I'm looking for a place to build something lasting. Way I see it, this ranch has good bones but needs work. I've got the skills and some capital. You've got the land and the legal claim. Seems like we could help each other." Eliza stood slowly, the harness dropping forgotten to the floor. "Mr. Holt, I appreciate your interest, but I'm not looking for a business partner. That's not what I'm offering." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Eliza felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Then perhaps you should clarify exactly what you are offering." He stepped onto the porch, and suddenly the space felt too small. Up close, she could smell leather and horse and something else, pine soap, maybe, or just the clean scent of a man who worked honest labor. "I'm offering marriage, Miss Carr, a union that would give us both what we need. You keep your land. I get a home. We build something together that neither of us could manage alone." The boldness of it stole her breath. You can't be serious, and we've known each other all of 3 minutes. I've made decisions on less and never regretted it. His gaze never wavered. I was told you're alone. Let me give you sons, woman. Let me give you a future that doesn't end with Silas Crane stealing everything your father built. The words should have offended her, should have sent her reaching for the shotgun just inside the door. Instead, she found herself struck by the directness of it, the complete absence of pretense. Here was a man who said what he meant. Consequences be damned. You speak of sons as if they're cattle to be branded and counted, she said, finding her voice. What about love? What about affection? Or does none of that matter in your grand plan? For the first time, something like uncertainty crossed his features. Love's a luxury folks like us can't always afford. Respect, partnership, working towards something together, that's what lasts. The rest. He shrugged those massive shoulders. The rest can come with time, or not. Either way, you'd have your land and a man willing to fight for it. And what do you get, besides a broken-down ranch and a sharp-tongued wife? A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. I get roots, a place to belong, and from what Thomas tells me, a woman with backbone enough to stand beside me when things get hard. Eliza turned away, gripping the porch rail. The sunset painted the land gold and crimson, beautiful in its desolation. This is insane. People don't just marry strangers. People do what they must to survive. His voice softened. I'm not asking you to decide right now, but I am asking you to think about it. What are your other options? She wanted to rage at him, to order him off her property. But the truth was a weight in her chest. She had no other options. None that didn't end with her losing everything. You'd need to prove yourself first, she heard herself saying. I won't tie myself to a man who's all talk. Fair enough, give me a week. Let me show you what I can do. And where exactly would you stay during this week of proving yourself? He gestured toward the creek. I've got a bedroll and a tent. I've slept in worse places, unless... He paused, and she could see him choosing his words carefully. Unless you'd rather I didn't stay at all. The challenge in his voice sparked something in her. Stay if you want. The creek's a quarter-mile that way. But don't expect me to cook for you or wash your clothes. You want to prove you can help this ranch? Start tomorrow at dawn. We'll see what you're made of. He picked up his hat, settling it back on his head. Dawn it is? He started to turn away, then looked back. One more thing. Miss Carr, I don't make offers lightly. When I say I'll do something, it gets done. That ranch of Crane's might be bigger, but I guarantee he's never tangled with someone like me. Big words from a man I just met. Yes, ma'am, but I tend to back them up. He touched the brim of his hat. Until tomorrow. She watched him lead his horse toward the creek, his long strides eating up the ground. When he was out of sight, she sank into the nearest chair, her legs suddenly unsteady. The door creaked open, and Uncle Thomas shuffled out. Eliza whirled on him. You were listening? Of course I was. I had to make sure he treated you proper. He lowered himself into the other chair with a satisfied grunt. Well, what do you think? I think you've lost your mind, bringing a man like that here. A man like what? Capable, strong, willing to work? Presumptuous, arrogant, talking about giving me sons like I'm some broodmare. Thomas chuckled. Shocked you, did he? Good. You need shocking. Been alone too long. Started thinking you could do everything yourself. I can. No, Lizzie, you can't. And there's no shame in that. He leaned forward, his weathered face serious. Your daddy was the same way. Stubborn as a mule. Thought asking for help was weakness. took your mama to teach him different. Mama loved him. Not at first. Their marriage was arranged too. You know, her father owed mine money, couldn't pay. Marriage canceled the debt. He smiled at her shocked expression. They never told you that, did they? Took them 2 years to find love. But when they did, it was the real thing. Strong as oak. Eliza stared at him. Her parents, whose love had been the bedrock of her childhood, started as a business arrangement? I don't believe you. Ask Martha Henderson next time she's by. She stood witness at their wedding. Cold as a January morning, it was. Your mama cried through the whole ceremony, and not from joy. He patted her hand. Point is, sometimes life pushes us down roads we wouldn't choose. Doesn't mean they can't lead somewhere good. A distant sound made them both look up. Down by the creek, Caleb was setting up his camp. Even from here, she could see the efficient way he moved, every action purposeful. He's not what I expected, she admitted quietly. Better or worse? She didn't answer, but Thomas saw enough in her face to smile. As darkness fell, Eliza found herself at her bedroom window, looking toward the creek. A small fire glowed in the distance, and she could make out Caleb's silhouette as he tended it. Tomorrow, he'd start trying to prove himself, and she'd have to decide if she could accept a future so different from anything she'd imagined. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, for the first time in months, she felt something that might have been hope. Dawn came wrapped in mist, the world soft and gray as Eliza made her way to the barn. She'd barely slept, her mind churning through the impossibility of her situation. But she'd be damned if she'd let Caleb Holt see her weakness. She'd risen early, determined to be working when he arrived. She needn't have bothered. The barn door stood open, and inside she found Caleb already at work, his shirt discarded despite the morning chill. Muscles rippled across his broad back as he hefted hay bales that she could barely budge, stacking them with easy efficiency. Morning, he said without turning around. Noticed your hay was scattered. Thought I'd reorganize before the day's heat. She stood frozen, watching him work. In the pale light filtering through the barn slats, she could see scars crisscrossing his back, some old and faded, others newer. This was a man who'd known violence, who'd survived things that would have broken lesser souls. Mr. Holt? Caleb. He turned to face her, apparently unbothered by his state of undress. If we're to work together, might as well use given names. She forced her eyes to stay on his face. Caleb. Then, I didn't expect. That is, you didn't need to start so early. You couldn't sleep. He reached for his shirt, pulling it on with casual grace. Your fence line on the north pastures got problems. Counted at least 12 posts that need replacing. I can start there after I finish here. We don't have spare posts. And saw some good timber down by the creek. I'll cut what we need. He paused, studying her face. You haven't eaten yet. It wasn't a question. Eliza bristled. I don't require mothering. Mr. Caleb. No, ma'am. But you can't work on an empty stomach. He moved past her, close enough that she caught that pine soap scent again. I trapped some rabbits this morning. They're cleaned and ready. Figured we could share breakfast, discuss the day's priorities. The presumption of it should have angered her. Instead, she found herself following him to where he'd set up a simple camp near the house, close enough to be convenient, far enough to be proper. A coffee pot sat on a bed of coals, and the promised rabbits were spitted and roasting. Sit, he said, gesturing to a log he'd dragged over. Your food's almost ready. She sat watching him tend the fire with practiced ease. You've done this before, lived rough. I mean, more times than I can count. He poured coffee into 2 tin cups, handing her one. Started working cattle when I was 12. Learned quick that the land doesn't care about your comfort. Thomas said you managed the rocking J. That's a far cry from sleeping on the ground. You had a nice house there. 4 rooms, real glass windows. His jaw tightened. Lost it all when the owner's son decided he didn't like taking orders from hired help. Accused me of stealing. Ran me off before I could defend myself. And you didn't fight back? He looked at her then, and she saw steel in those storm-colored eyes. Would have killed him if I had. Figured my freedom was worth more than my pride. They ate in companionable silence. The rabbit surprisingly good. Eliza found herself relaxing despite her reservations. There was something steady about Caleb, something that made the chaos of recent months seem manageable. We should talk terms, she said finally. If you're serious about this arrangement. I'm serious. He set down his plate, giving her his full attention. What do you need to know? Everything. Your plans, your expectations, and what kind of marriage you're proposing. He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words. I'm proposing a partnership, full and equal. Your name stays on the deed. This will always be Carr land. But I'll work it like it's mine, because it will be, through you. And personally, what do you expect from a wife? Color touched his weathered cheeks. Companionship. Someone to build something with. As for other aspects, he cleared his throat. That would be your choice. I'm not a man who takes what isn't freely given. The delicacy with which he addressed the subject touched her more than grand speeches might have. And if I never choose to? That is, if ours remains a marriage in name only, then I'll respect that. His gaze held hers steady. Though I hope, in time, you might come to see me as more than just a business partner. A shout from the road broke the moment. 3 riders were approaching fast, dust billowing behind them. Eliza recognized the lead rider's flashy palomino immediately. Silas Crane. Caleb stood slowly, his hand moving instinctively toward his hip where a gun might rest. He wasn't wearing one, but the gesture spoke volumes. "Morning, Eliza," Crane called out as he reined in, his voice carrying false cheer. He was a handsome man in an oily sort of way, with slicked back hair and clothes too fine for ranch work. His 2 companions were rougher sorts, their eyes constantly moving, hands resting on their weapons. Mr. Crane. Eliza stood as well, acutely aware of Caleb's presence beside her. You're on my land. Now, is that any way to greet a neighbor? Crane's smile never reached his eyes. He dismounted, making a show of looking around. Heard you had some excitement yesterday. Whimsy said the bank's finally calling in their markers. News travels fast. It does indeed. His gaze landed on Caleb, taking in the big man's measure. Don't believe we've met. Silas Crane, owner of the Double Bar Ranch. Caleb Holt. No offered hand, no pleasantries, just the name. Delivered flat. Crane's smile flickered. Holt, you're the one who ran the Rocking J for a spell. Heard there was some trouble there. You heard wrong. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. One of Crane's men shifted in his saddle, leather creaking. Gentlemen, Eliza interjected, that perhaps you could state your business now we have work to do. Of course. Crane turned back to her, dismissing Caleb with the gesture. I'm here with an offer, a good one. Cash for your land, enough to set you up comfortable anywhere you'd like to go. And my land's not for sale. Everything's for sale at the right price. He pulled out a leather wallet, making a show of the bills inside. $300. Cash. Today. That's double what the banks owed. No. Now, Eliza, can I call you Eliza? Be reasonable. You can't make that payment. In a week, the bank'll auction this place and you'll get nothing. Take my offer and walk away with dignity." The lady said no. Caleb's voice was quiet, but it carried weight. Crane's face flushed. "I wasn't talking to you, drifter. You're talking to her on her land. Show respect or leave." The two men locked eyes, and Eliza could feel the violence simmering just below the surface. Crane's men had straightened in their saddles, hands hovering near their guns. "Mr. Crane," she said firmly, "I appreciate your offer, but my answer remains no. Now, I'll ask you to leave. You're making a mistake." All pretense of friendliness had vanished from Crane's voice. "This land's no good without water rights, and those rights run through my property now." "The creek's been flowing through Carr land for 30 years, Eliza protested. "Maps can be redrawn, surveys corrected." His smile was sharp as broken glass. "Amazing what a man can accomplish with the right connections." "That's theft," Caleb said simply. "That's business." Crane swung back into his saddle. "You've got until week's end, Eliza. After that," he shrugged. "Well, desperate people do desperate things. Wouldn't want to see this place burn down from a stray spark. Dry as it's been, fire would spread quick." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Caleb took a step forward, but Eliza caught his arm, under her hand. His muscles were coiled tight as spring steel. "We'll be watching for sparks," Caleb said. "Real close." Crane laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Big man, let's see how big you are when—" He cut himself off, wheeling his horse around. "Week's end, Eliza. Think about it." They watched the riders disappear into the dust. Only when they were gone did Eliza realize she was still holding Caleb's arm. She let go quickly, stepping back. "He means it," she said quietly. "About the fire. He burned out the Hendersons 2 years ago. Nothing could be proved." "Let him try." Caleb's face was grim. "I've dealt with his kind before. You can't fight 3 men. More, probably. He's got a dozen hands at the double bar. Not planning to fight them all at once." He turned to her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "But I'll fight every last one before I let them take what's yours." The fierce protectiveness in his voice shook her. This man, this stranger who'd known her less than a day, was ready to stand between her and harm. When was the last time anyone had stood up for her like that? "Why?" The word slipped out before she could stop it. "Why do you care so much? You could ride on, find easier work elsewhere." He was quiet for a long moment, looking out over the land. "My whole life, I've been moving. Never had anything that was mine, anywhere I belonged. When Thomas told me about this place, about you..." He turned back to her. "I knew. Don't ask me how. Just knew this was where I was meant to be." Eliza felt something crack inside her chest, some wall she'd built against hope and possibility. "Caleb, we've got work to do," he said, but his voice was gentle. "Those fence posts won't cut themselves. You want to help, or you got other chores?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. As they walked toward the creek together, she found herself stealing glances at him. This giant of a man who'd appeared in her life like something out of a story, ready to fight for land that wasn't even his. Not yet, anyway. But maybe that could change. Week's end was coming fast, and with it, decisions that would alter everything. But for now, there was work to do, and for the first time in months, she didn't have to do it alone. The evening air had cooled considerably when Eliza found Caleb sitting by the creek, whittling a piece of cedar. They'd worked side by side all day, replacing fence posts and mending wire, and her hands bore new blisters despite their calluses. He'd tried to make her stop, but she'd refused, matching him post for post until he'd finally smiled and stopped arguing. "Mind if I sit?" she asked, holding a basket. He gestured to a flat rock beside him. "Your creek, your rocks. Brought supper, figured you'd earned a hot meal." She unpacked cornbread, beans, and the last of her preserved peaches. "It's not much. It's plenty." He set aside his whittling. She could see it was taking shape as a horse. "More than I expected." They ate quietly, watching the sun paint the water gold and crimson. Finally, Eliza gathered her courage. "Tell me about the rocking jay, the truth of what happened." Caleb's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Fair enough. You're considering tying your life to mine. You deserve to know." He picked up a stone, rolling it between his fingers. "I started there as a hand, worked my way up to foreman. Old man Jameson was a good boss, fair and honest. When he died, his son inherited." "The one who accused you of stealing?" "Robert Jameson, soft hands and a mean streak wide as the Rio Grande." Caleb threw the stone into the creek. "He wanted to sell to a syndicate back east. I advised against it. The land meant everything to the old man, and the syndicate would have broken it up, sold it piecemeal. Robert didn't appreciate my interference, so he fabricated charges against you. Claimed I'd been skimming cattle, selling them off books. Had papers to prove it, even witnesses." His laugh was bitter. "Money can buy a lot of testimony. Sheriff was ready to arrest me, but Jameson said he'd let me go if I left quietly. So I did." Eliza studied his profile in the fading light. "That must have been hard, losing everything you'd built. Harder was knowing the ranch would be destroyed. 300 families depended on that land for work." He turned to her. "That's why I can't stand men like Crane. They see land as commodity, not community." "Is that how you see this place, community?" "I see potential, good soil, decent water when Crane's not stealing it. With work, this could support cattle and crops both. Maybe even bring in some of the families who lost their places when the rocking jay sold." The vision he painted made her heart ache with possibility. "You really think it could be saved?" "I know it can." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a worn leather pouch. "This is what I've saved. $800. Enough to pay the bank and have money left for improvements." Eliza nearly dropped her cup. $800. Caleb, that's a fortune, and you could buy your own land with that." "Could. But land without purpose is just dirt." He looked at her directly. "This place has purpose. You give it purpose. Your father's dreams, your sweat and stubbornness. That's worth more than any empty acreage. I can't take your money. Not taking, investing in the land, in the future." He paused. "In us, if you'll have me." The words hung between them, heavy with promise. Before Eliza could respond, Uncle Thomas appeared, moving slowly down the creek path. "I thought I'd find you two here," he wheezed, lowering himself onto a boulder. "Need to tell you something, Lizzie, about your land. If it's more bad news, I'm not sure I can bear it. Might be the opposite." He pulled out a yellowed envelope. "Your daddy gave me this years ago. Said to keep it safe, only give it to you if things got desperate. Reckon we're there?" Eliza took the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside were legal documents, surveys, and deeds dating back to the original Spanish land grants. As she read, her eyes widened. "This says we own water rights to the whole valley, not just the creek on our land, but the source springs. They're on the back 40, aren't they?" Thomas nodded. "Your great-grandfather was smart. When he bought this land from the Spanish grant holders, he made sure to include all water sources. Crane's been lying about his rights. He's got usage only, and that's dependent on Carr family permission. Why didn't Papa tell me? Because he knew Crane would kill for those rights. Keeping it secret kept you safe. Thomas coughed, a harsh sound. But safe don't mean much if you lose the land anyway. Caleb had been reading over her shoulder. This changes everything. With documented water rights, this land's worth 10 times what Crane offered, which means he'll be 10 times more determined to take it, Eliza said quietly. Let him try. Caleb's voice held quiet confidence. Legal documents beat hired guns in any court. You really think it's that simple? She turned to face him. Men like Crane don't fight in courts. They fight with fire and bullets and accidents in the night. Then we'll be ready for that too. He touched her hand briefly, the contact electric. You're not alone in this anymore. Thomas cleared his throat. Speaking of not alone, there's something else you should know. Caleb, about your own history. The big man frowned. My history? Your mother, Maria Holt. She worked here once, years ago, sweet girl, helped Lizzie's mother with the house. Thomas's eyes were kind but steady. She was close to my brother James, very close. Understanding dawned on Caleb's face. You're saying... I'm saying family's complicated out here. Blood doesn't always follow marriage lines. Thomas stood with effort. My brother died before he could do right by your mother, but he mentioned you in his will. Small provision, but legal. Makes you part heir to whatever I leave behind. I don't want charity. Not charity, justice, delayed, maybe, but still justice. Thomas patted Caleb's shoulder. Welcome to the family, son, such as it is. He shuffled away, leaving them in stunned silence. Finally, Eliza spoke. Did you know about the connection? No, Mother never said. She told me my father died before I was born. Nothing more. Are you angry that she kept it secret? Caleb considered. Secrets have their reasons. She was protecting me. Probably. Bastard sons don't inherit, don't belong. Better I thought my father a ghost than a man who couldn't claim me. The pain in his voice made her reach out instinctively, her hand covering his. You belong here now. However it happened, whatever brought you here. You belong. He turned his hand palm up, fingers intertwining with hers. Do I? Even with all this complication? Especially with it. She squeezed his hand. Though I have to say, finding out we're some sort of cousins puts a strange twist on your marriage proposal. A distant cousins, very distant. His thumb traced circles on her palm. And not blood related to you at all. Thomas's brother, not yours. Still, people will talk. People always talk. Question is, do we let their tongues decide our lives? She looked at their joined hands, marveling at how right it felt. This man who'd been a stranger days ago now felt like an anchor in the storm. There's something else, in those papers, a provision I didn't notice before. Oh? The water rights pass through the family line, but they have to stay with the land. If I marry outside the county, if the land passes to non-family ownership, the rights revert to the state. A clever great-grandfather. Yes, but it means, if we marry, if you become part of this land legally as well as by blood. She took a breath. The rights would be ironclad. Crane couldn't challenge them without challenging the marriage itself. Is that the only reason to consider my proposal? Legal protection? She looked up at him then, this giant of a man with gentle hands and fierce loyalty. No, not the only reason. Good. He stood, pulling her up with him. Because I have to tell you something. When I said I knew this was where I belonged, it wasn't just the land, it was you. The way Thomas described you, stubborn, proud, fighting against impossible odds, I thought, there's a woman worth riding 1,000 miles to meet. And now that you've met me, now I think 1,000 miles wasn't nearly far enough. I'd have ridden to the ends of the earth. He cupped her face gently. I know we've known each other mere days. I know this is madness by any sensible measure. But nothing in my life has ever felt as right as standing here with you. Eliza's heart thundered in her chest. Caleb. I'm not asking for an answer tonight, but I am asking you to think about it. Really think about it. Not just as business, not just as survival, but as possibility. The possibility of building something together that's bigger than either of us alone. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He smiled, releasing her face but keeping hold of one hand. Walk you back to the house? I'd like that. They walked slowly, neither wanting to break the spell of the evening. At the porch, he stopped, lifting her hand to his lips in an old-fashioned gesture that made her knees weak. Good night, Eliza. Good night, Caleb. She watched him walk back toward his camp, broad shoulders silhouetted against the stars. Inside the house, she spread the water rights documents on the kitchen table, but her mind wasn't on legal papers. It was on the feeling of his hand in hers. The promise in his eyes, the future spreading before them like an unwritten map. Through the window, she could see his campfire glowing in the darkness. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, Crane's threats, the bank's deadline. But tonight, for the first time in months, she felt hope burning just as bright as that distant fire. The morning brought trouble wrapped in legal paper. Harold Whimsy arrived just after dawn, accompanied by two men Eliza didn't recognize, hard-faced strangers wearing deputy badges that looked too new to be trusted. Miss Carr, Whimsy called out, not bothering to dismount. Got a court order here. Judge Morrison says you're to cease all improvements to the property pending resolution of ownership. Caleb emerged from the barn, pitchfork in hand. His presence made the deputies shift nervously in their saddles. Let me see that order, Eliza demanded. Whimsy tossed the paper down with a smirk. Mr. Crane filed a claim on the water rights. Says your documentation is forged. Judge wants everything frozen until it's sorted out. Morrison's in Crane's pocket, Caleb said quietly. Everyone knows it. That's slander, Drifter. One of the deputies spoke up. You'd best watch your tongue. Or what? Caleb's voice remained calm, but he'd shifted his grip on the pitchfork. You'll arrest me for speaking truth? The tension stretched tight as wire. Eliza stepped between them, scanning the court order. This is dated yesterday, convenient timing, considering we only discovered the documents last night. Don't know nothing about that, Whimsy said. Just know you're to stop all work immediately. No fence repairs, no building, no changes to the property whatsoever. And if we continue working our own land, then these deputies are authorized to arrest you for contempt. His smile was oily with satisfaction. Mr. Crane wanted me to remind you his offer still stands. Be smart, Miss Carr. After they left, Eliza sank onto the porch steps, the court order crumpling in her fist. He's cutting us off at the knees. Can't improve the land, can't prove it's viable, can't make it attractive to other buyers. He's scared, Caleb said, sitting beside her. This proves the water documents are real. Otherwise, why bother with legal maneuvering? Fat lot of good that does us if we can't work. Order says no improvements. Doesn't say anything about maintenance. He smiled grimly. Amazing how much maintenance an old ranch needs. That afternoon, they were maintaining the chicken coop when riders approached. Not Crane's men this time, but their neighbors. Tom and Martha Henderson, whose own ranch had survived Crane's attention, led the group. I heard you got served papers, Tom said without preamble. He was a lean man in his 50s, face weathered to leather. Also heard Caleb Holt was back in the territory. News travels fast, Caleb observed. It does when it matters. Tom dismounted, extending his hand. You probably don't remember me. I worked the Rocking J 20 years ago, when you were just a sprout following your mama around. Caleb's face changed, memory dawning. Tom Henderson, you taught me to rope. That I did. Good to see you grown, son. Tom's expression hardened. We've come to talk about Crane. Martha Henderson, a formidable woman who'd borne 8 children and buried 3, spoke up. That snake's been pressuring everyone in the valley, buying up water access, charging triple for usage. If he gets car land, he'll control everything. What do you propose we do about it? Eliza asked. Fight back, said another neighbor, young Sam Morrison, no relation to the corrupt judge, but smart-like, legal-like. With what money? Eliza gestured helplessly. Court battles take cash we don't have. Maybe not court battles, Martha said. No, but there's other ways. County commissioner elections coming up. Judge Morrison's term ends next year. If we organize... That's a year away, Caleb interrupted gently. We need solutions now. Tom and Martha exchanged glances. There might be something, Tom said slowly. You know the old Spanish grant covers more than just your land. Eliza? Original survey shows it running clear to Devil's Canyon. That's 15 miles north, Eliza protested. It's worthless badland. Worthless to ranch, Sam agreed. But the railroad's been surveying for a new line. Route through Devil's Canyon would save them 50 miles of track. Eliza's heart jumped. Railroad rights could be worth thousands, Martha confirmed. If you can prove ownership, if Crane doesn't block it, if the railroad's interested, too many ifs. But it was hope. They spent the next hour strategizing, the neighbors sharing everything they knew about Crane's operations, his weaknesses, his patterns. When they finally left, Eliza felt less alone than she had in months. Good people, Caleb observed, watching them go. The best. They've helped keep me going since Papa died. She paused. Tom really taught you to rope? Among other things, he was kind to a bastard kid when not everyone was. Caleb's smile held memory and pain. Told me once that a man's worth wasn't in his name, but in his actions. Wise words. Words I've tried to live by. He turned to her. Eliza, we need to talk about the marriage proposition. Her stomach fluttered. Oh? Crane's escalating. Today it's court orders. Tomorrow could be worse. If we're married, it complicates his legal attacks. Makes it harder to challenge your ownership. How romantic, she said dryly. Marry me for legal protection. That's not... He stopped, running a hand through his hair. I'm making a mess of this. What I meant was, the danger's real and growing. If something happens to you, unmarried with no direct heirs, the land goes to probate. Crane would swoop in like a vulture. And if something happens to me married, then your husband inherits. And I promise you, Eliza, I'd guard this land with my life, not for me, but for your father's memory, for what you fought to preserve. She studied his earnest face. You're really terrible at proposals, you know that? Or so I've been told. He smiled ruefully. Usually I lead with the part about giving you sons. Despite everything, she laughed. Yes, that was much better. Nothing says romance like breeding stock negotiations. Would it help if I got on one knee? Don't you dare, I'd never stop laughing. She sobered. Caleb, I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. Ask. If I say yes, if we marry, what are you expecting? Really? Not the pretty words for public consumption, but the truth. He was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. I expect to work alongside you every day, to share meals and conversation, to build something lasting. I hope, in time, we might build affection too. Maybe even love. He met her eyes. As for the physical aspects of marriage, I meant what I said. Only what you're willing to give when you're ready to give it. And if that's never, then I'll have gained a partner and friend. That's more than many marriages have. The honesty of it, the lack of pressure or demand moved her more than grand declarations might have. You're a strange man, Caleb Holt. I've been told that too. She made her decision in that moment, looking at this giant who handled her heart as gently as he'd handle a newborn foal. Yes, he blinked. Yes? Yes, I'll marry you, God help us both, but yes. She held up a hand as he stepped toward her. But I have conditions. Name them. The marriage certificate shows this as a partnership, equal partners in all decisions about the land. And we court properly first. I won't have people saying I married in desperation. How long? 2 weeks. Long enough to prove this isn't just about the bank deadline. She paused. And you move into the house, the barn. I mean, it's got a good room in the loft. And, well, married couples don't live in separate camps. His smile was slow and warm. Anything else? Yes. She stepped closer, heart hammering. If we're to court, we should probably start with this. She rose on her tiptoes and kissed him, meant it to be quick, a seal on their bargain. But his arms came around her, gentle but sure, and the kiss deepened into something that made her knees weak and her heart sore. When they finally parted, both breathing hard, she saw wonder in his eyes that probably matched her own. Eliza Carr, he said softly. I think you just gave me another reason to fight for this land. Just the land? She managed, still caught in his arms. No, not just the land. He kissed her forehead, then released her with obvious reluctance. I should move my things to the barn. Caleb? She called as he turned to go. Thank you. For everything. For being here. For standing with me. For being you. His smile lit up his weathered face. Thank me after we've won. This fight's just beginning. As she watched him walk away, Eliza touched her lips, still feeling the warmth of his kiss. Martha Henderson had told her once that the best marriages were forged in hardship, tested by fire, strengthened by shared struggle. Looking at the man who'd agreed to share her burden and her life, she began to believe it might be true. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Somewhere out there, Silas Crane was plotting their destruction. But here, now, she had an ally, a partner, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something that transcended mere survival. 2 weeks to court properly, she'd said. She had a feeling they'd be the longest and shortest 2 weeks of her life. The storm rolled in fast from the north, black clouds swallowing the afternoon sun. Eliza had seen enough West Texas weather to recognize trouble, and this had all the markings of a bad one. She was helping Caleb secure the barn doors when the first fat raindrops began to fall. They're going to be a gully washer, he said, testing the reinforced latches. Good for the land, bad for everything else. Thunder cracked overhead, and the rain went from drops to sheets in seconds. They ran for the house, but were soaked through before they made the porch. Eliza fumbled with the door, laughing despite the situation. Get the fire going, she said, water streaming from her hair. I'll find towels and... A tremendous crack split the air. Lightning had struck the old cottonwood by the creek, splitting it down the middle. In the flash of light, Eliza saw riders, a dozen or more, heading their way fast. Caleb. He was already moving, grabbing the rifle from above the door. How many? Too many. Her heart hammered as she reached for her father's shotgun. In this weather, they're not here for coffee. The riders thundered into the yard, barely visible through the driving rain. Eliza Carr! The voice was Crane's, carrying over the storm. Got a new court order. You're to vacate immediately pending investigation of fraud. Like hell, Caleb muttered, checking his ammunition. Eliza peered through the window. The men were spreading out, surrounding the house. They can't serve papers in this weather. It'll be ruined before... They're not here to serve papers, Caleb said grimly. This is cover. Storm hides what happens next. A window shattered in the back room. Then another. Rocks, thrown hard enough to break glass. Fire would be too obvious in this rain, Caleb reasoned quickly. They're trying to drive us out, make it look like storm damage. More windows broke. The wind howled through, driving rain into the house. Eliza heard whooping from outside, the crash of something heavy hitting the porch. Crane! Caleb roared, his voice carrying command. Call off your dogs before someone gets hurt. Ain't my fault if the storm damages property, Crane shouted back. Abandoned property especially. A torch, somehow still burning despite the rain, came through the broken parlor window. Caleb stomped it out, cursing. Another followed, then another. Kerosene, Eliza realized. They've soaked them in kerosene. The house was becoming a battlefield. Rain poured through broken windows while Crane's men kept up their assault. Some had dismounted. She could see shapes moving in the darkness, heading for the barn. The horses, she gasped. I'll go, Caleb said. No. She grabbed his arm. That's what they want. Separate us. We stay together. A figure appeared at the broken parlor window, trying to climb through. Caleb's rifle butt caught him in the face, sending him tumbling back into the storm. Federal Marshal, a new voice cut through the chaos. Everyone freeze, guns down. For a moment, nothing changed. Then slowly, the sounds of destruction ceased. Eliza peered out to see uniformed men, real federal officers, surrounding Crane's group. Marshal Braddock, the lead officer announced, water streaming from his hat. Had reports of claim jumping and false legal documents. Seems we arrived just in time. Storm damage, Crane said smoothly. We came to help and save it. Braddock's voice was flat. I've got witnesses saw you riding here armed. Plus, that court order you're waving, Judge Morrison issued it yesterday. Problem is, he was in Austin yesterday. I know because I was with him. Even in the rain, Eliza could see Crane's face go pale. Inside, all of you, Braddock commanded. We'll sort this out proper. What followed was controlled chaos. Federal officers crowded into Eliza's damaged home, Crane and his men under guard. Braddock, a weathered man with intelligent eyes, took statements while his deputies collected evidence. The real documents? He asked Eliza quietly. The water rights? She retrieved them from the strongbox, hands shaking. Braddock examined them carefully, then nodded. These are genuine Spanish seals. Proper registration. Crane's got nothing. How did you know to come? Caleb asked. Letter from a concerned citizen. Said there might be trouble tonight. Braddock's eyes twinkled. Older gentleman wheezed a lot. Wouldn't give his name. Uncle Thomas. Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. Mr. Crane. Braddock turned to the sodden rancher. You're under arrest for attempted fraud, intimidation, and about 6 other charges I'll think of by morning. You can't. I can and I am. Braddock nodded to his deputies. Take him and his men. We'll let a real judge sort this out. As they were led away, Crane turned back, his face twisted with rage. This isn't over, Carr. Yes, Braddock said mildly. It is federal investigation into your land dealings. Should keep you busy for years. After they left, Eliza and Caleb stood in their ruined parlor, rain still dripping through broken windows. The house was a disaster, but they were safe. We need to board these up, Caleb said practically. In a minute, Eliza was shaking, reaction setting in. Just give me a minute. He pulled her into his arms, and she let herself lean into his strength. It's over, he murmured. You're safe. The land's safe. The house can be fixed. Windows can be replaced. His arms tightened. You can't be... They stood there, holding each other while the storm raged outside. Finally, Eliza pulled back. We should get married tomorrow. He blinked. Tomorrow? What happened to 2 weeks of courting? After tonight, I think we've been tested enough. She managed a shaky smile. Besides, I want it done before anything else happens. Eliza. His voice was gentle. I want you to be sure, not deciding from fear or reaction. I'm not. She placed her hands on his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong under her palms. Tonight, when I thought we might die. All I could think was that I'd waited too long already. I'm deciding from clarity. Caleb. From knowing what matters. He studied her face, then nodded slowly. Tomorrow, then, if the preacher will do it. He will. Martha Henderson will make sure of it. They spent the rest of the night boarding windows and mopping water, working side by side in companionable silence. When dawn finally came, breaking clear and bright after the storm, they stood on the porch surveying the damage. Going to need a lot of work, Caleb observed. A good thing I'm marrying a man who's not afraid of it. He smiled, pulling her close. Good thing I'm marrying a woman worth working for. Uncle Thomas arrived with the sunrise, Martha Henderson beside him. Heard there was excitement, he wheezed. Also heard there might be a wedding needs planning. News travels fast, Eliza said. It does when it's good news. Martha bustled forward, all business. Now you can't get married looking like drowned rats. Thomas, take Caleb to town for proper clothes. Eliza, you're coming with me. I've got a dress that'll do. Ooh, Martha, I couldn't. Hush, it's my daughter's from her wedding. She'd be honored. Martha's eyes were kind. Your mama would want you properly dressed. By afternoon, the small church in town was filled with neighbors. Word had spread about the night's events, and everyone wanted to witness something good after so much trouble. Eliza stood at the altar in a cream-colored dress that fit like it was made for her. Wildflowers from Martha's garden in her hair. Caleb waited for her, transformed in a borrowed black suit, his eyes never leaving her face as she walked toward him. Reverend Davies performed the ceremony with appropriate gravity, though his eyes twinkled when he reached the part about for better or worse. It seems you two have already had a taste of the worst, he said. Makes the better all the sweeter. When Caleb kissed her, the entire church erupted in cheers. It wasn't the wedding she dreamed of as a girl, but it was perfect in its own way, surrounded by community, born from hardship, sealed with hope. At the reception in the church hall, Braddock appeared, hat in hand. Wanted to let you know. Mrs. Holt, Crane's already trying to make deals. Reckon he'll give up every corrupt official in 3 counties to save his skin. Good, Eliza said firmly. Let them all fall. My thoughts exactly. No, he tipped his hat. Congratulations to you both. Your daddy would be proud, ma'am. As evening fell, they returned to the damaged house. Their wedding night would be spent in a home with boarded windows and water-stained floors. But neither cared. I have something for you, Caleb said, producing a small wooden box. It's not much, but inside was a simple gold band, worn smooth with age. It was my mother's, he said quietly. Only thing of value she left me. Eliza felt tears spring to her eyes as he slipped it onto her finger. It's perfect. House isn't much of a wedding gift, he said, gesturing at the damage. The house doesn't matter. She took his face in her hands. You stood with me against impossible odds. You could have run when Crane's men came. Any sensible man would have. Good thing I'm not sensible. Good thing. She kissed him softly. Ready to start our life together, husband. He'd been ready since the day I met you, wife. They stood together on the porch, watching the sun set over their land. Tomorrow would bring work, repairs to make, cattle to tend, a future to build. But tonight, they had each other. And that was enough. In the distance, a coyote called to its mate. The sound echoed across the valley, wild and free and full of promise. Eliza leaned into Caleb's embrace, feeling his strength, his steadiness, his commitment to her and to this place they'd fought to save. And no regrets? He asked softly. None, she answered, and meant it. Not a single one. The morning after their wedding dawned crisp and clear, but Eliza woke to the sound of horses, too many horses. She reached for Caleb, finding his side of the bed empty and cold. Through the boarded window, she could see him standing on the porch, rifle in hand. "A company," he said quietly as she joined him, hastily dressed. 20 riders, maybe more. But it wasn't Crane's men this time. The lead rider carried a white flag, and as they drew closer, Eliza recognized him, Frank Morrison, the judge's own son, and one of the few honest men in the county. "Mrs. Holt," Frank tipped his hat. "Mr. Holt, I'm here on official business, but not what you might think." "Speak plain," Caleb said, not lowering his rifle. "Crane's escaped, killed a deputy, took 6 men with him." Frank's face was grim. "Marshal Braddock's forming a posse, wants to know if you'll join us." "When?" Caleb asked. "Now, trail's still fresh. He's heading for Mexico, we think, but—" Frank hesitated. He swore vengeance. Said he'd see the car land burned before he'd let you have it. Eliza's blood ran cold. "He's coming here." "That's Braddock's fear. Crane's got nothing left to lose now." Caleb looked at Eliza, a question in his eyes. She nodded. "Go. I'll get the Hendersons, Ford up here." "I'm not leaving you." "You are." Her voice was steel. "Best defense is to catch him before he gets here. I can hold the house." They prepared quickly. Caleb checked and rechecked weapons while Eliza packed provisions. The posse waited, grim-faced men who understood the stakes. "If he circles back," Caleb began. "He won't get past me." Eliza kissed him hard. "You come back to me. Caleb Holt. That's an order." He smiled despite the situation. "Yes, ma'am." After they rode out, Eliza wasted no time. She sent word to the Hendersons, then began preparing the house for siege. By noon, she had help, Tom and Martha Henderson, their eldest boys, and 3 other neighboring families. "Never thought I'd see the day," Martha said, loading shotguns with practiced ease. "Silas Crane, a fugitive, always knew he was mean, but murder. Desperate men do desperate things," Tom said. He'd taken position at an upstairs window. "Question is, will he really come here?" They got their answer at sunset. The attack came from 3 sides at once, not the chaotic assault of the storm night, but coordinated military style. Crane had learned from his mistakes. "Fire!" Tom shouted, and windows erupted with gunfire. Eliza worked the lever of her Winchester, picking targets carefully. Crane's men had taken cover behind water troughs and fence posts, keeping up steady fire that chipped away at the house's defenses. "Where's Crane?" she called out. Can't see him. Sam Morrison had the west side, but that's his horse by the barn. The barn. Eliza's heart sank. If they fired the barn, the wind would carry sparks to the house. Even as she thought it, smoke began rising from that direction. They're trying to burn us out. Let them try, Martha said grimly, passing ammunition. Tom, take your boys, get to that barn, rest of us will cover you. What followed was brutal. Tom and his sons made a desperate run for the barn while the rest laid down covering fire. They made it, barely, and soon water buckets were flying. But it was a distraction. Eliza realized it too late. The house! Someone screamed. They're at the back! Crane himself appeared in the kitchen doorway, gun drawn. Eliza spun, bringing her rifle up, but he was already too close. Drop it, he snarled, for his fine clothes were mud-stained, his face haggard with days on the run. Drop it or I'll... The shot came from behind Eliza. Martha Henderson stood in the hallway, smoking Derringer in hand. Crane staggered, clutching his shoulder, gun falling from nerveless fingers. That's for my cousin you burned out, Martha said conversationally. This is for threatening Eliza. But before she could fire again, more shots erupted outside. Shouts, confusion, then a familiar voice roaring over the chaos. Posse, drop your weapons! The cavalry had arrived. Or rather, Caleb had arrived, leading Braddock's men in a charge that sent Crane's surviving followers scattering. Crane himself tried to run, wounded shoulder and all. He made it 3 steps before Caleb's massive frame filled the doorway. Going somewhere? Crane pulled a hidden pistol, desperation making him fast. But Caleb was faster. The 2 shots sounded almost as one. Crane fell, his shot going wide. Caleb's had not. Is he... Eliza couldn't finish. Caleb knelt beside the fallen man. Alive. Barely. He looked up at Braddock, who'd just entered. He's all yours. Marshal. Good work? Braddock surveyed the scene. Though I'd appreciate if folks would stop shooting up Mrs. Holt's kitchen, getting to be a habit. The aftermath was chaos. Wounded to tend, fires to douse, statements to give. But finally, as full dark fell, Eliza found herself alone with Caleb on what remained of their porch. You came back, she said simply. I told you I would. He pulled her close. Tracked him from Devil's Canyon. Knew he'd double back, try to finish what he started. Man like Crane can't let go of hate. It's really over now? Really over. His men are scattered or captured. Judge Morrison's under arrest. Seems he folded like paper when Braddock questioned him. Half the county's corruption is unraveling. Eliza leaned into him, exhaustion hitting like a physical weight. The house is more holes than walls now. He will rebuild. Insurance money from the railroad deal will help. She pulled back. What railroad deal? He smiled. Didn't get a chance to tell you. While we were tracking Crane, passed through Devil's Canyon. Railroad surveyor was there, frustrated because the land office couldn't tell him who owned the passage rights. I may have mentioned your name. Caleb! He's coming by tomorrow. Seems they're very interested in negotiating. Very interested. His smile widened. Mentioned something about $5,000 just for surveying rights. $5,000. Enough to rebuild, restock, and have money left over. Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. We're going to make it. Never doubted it. He kissed her forehead. Though I'd prefer fewer gunfights in our future. Agreed. She paused. Caleb, what you said that first day about giving me sons? His face colored slightly. I was an ass, proposing like you were livestock. No. She placed a finger on his lips. You were honest, direct. It shocked me then, but now... She took a breath. Now I think I'd like that. Sons, daughters too. A full house. His eyes darkened with emotion. Eliza. After we rebuild, of course. Can't raise babies in a house full of bullet holes? He laughed, the sound rich and warm. Mrs. Holt, you are a practical woman. Mr. Holt, you married a practical woman. She stood, tugging him up. Now come inside. Martha left stew and you need to eat. Yes, ma'am. They walked into their battle-scarred home together. Tomorrow would bring railroad surveyors and reconstruction, legal papers and new possibilities. But tonight, they had each other, and a future stretching bright before them. Through the kitchen window, Eliza could see neighbors still helping, cleaning up damage, boarding broken windows. Community. That's what Caleb had seen when he looked at this land. Not just soil and cattle, but people worth fighting for. No regrets? Caleb asked, echoing his question from their wedding night. Eliza looked around at her ruined kitchen, thought of all they'd endured, all they'd won. Then she looked at her husband, this giant of a man who'd ridden into her life with an outrageous proposal and a heart big enough to hold all her dreams. Not one, she said, and sealed it with a kiss that promised everything. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead, eternal and unchanged. The land endured as it always had. And on that land, two people who'd found each other against all odds began the real work of building a life together. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever was. But as Eliza fell asleep that night, safe in Caleb's arms despite the drafts through patched walls, she knew they'd weather whatever came. They were Texans, after all, and Texans didn't quit. 6 months later, the Carr Holt Ranch bore little resemblance to the struggling homestead it had been. New fencing stretched across restored pastures. The house stood proud with fresh paint and real glass windows. And the sound of hammering echoed from where Caleb and Tom Henderson worked on a new barn. Eliza stood on the porch, one hand resting on her swelling belly, watching the transformation with deep satisfaction. The railroad money had been a godsend, but it was the community's effort that had truly rebuilt their home. Every neighbor had contributed, labor, materials, expertise, or simply encouragement. You shouldn't be on your feet so much, Martha Henderson called from inside, where she was helping organize the nursery. That baby needs you resting. The baby needs fresh air, Eliza countered, but she settled into the rocking chair Caleb had made for her. Besides, I want to watch them raise the barn roof. It was a sight to behold. 20 men working in harmony, following Caleb's lead as they maneuvered the massive beams into place. Her husband's strength was remarkable, but it was his leadership that impressed her more. The way he guided without dominating, encouraged without patronizing. Mrs. Holt, a young voice interrupted her thoughts. Billy Patterson, all of 14 and eager to prove himself, stood hat in hand. Mr. Caleb asked me to bring you this, said you'd want to see it right away. The envelope bore the seal of the Texas Railroad Commission. Inside, documents confirming the final payment for the Devil's Canyon route, along with a proposal for additional development. The numbers made her head spin. Good news? Martha emerged, wiping dusty hands on her apron. The railroad wants to build a depot, here, on our land. They're offering... Eliza had to sit down. They're offering enough to set up the next 3 generations. Martha whistled low. The Lord provides... Through friends and neighbors, Eliza corrected. No, without everyone's help. Hush. You'd have done the same for any of us. Martha's eyes grew misty. Your papa would be so proud. Lizzie. This land thriving. You with a good man and a baby coming. As if summoned by the mention, Caleb appeared, sawdust in his hair and a worried look on his face. You all right? Billy said you looked peaked. I'm fine. Better than fine. She showed him the railroad documents. We're going to be depot owners. He read quickly, eyebrows rising. This is substantial. It's security, she said softly. For our children, their children. His hand found hers, squeezing gently. Speaking of which, Doc Morrison's here, wants to check on you. The examination was routine, but the doctor's conclusion was not. Twins, he announced, packing up his bag. Strong heartbeats, both of them. You're carrying 2 babies, Mrs. Holt. Eliza stared at him. 2? Runs in families sometimes. Your grandmother was a twin, wasn't she? After he left, Eliza and Caleb sat in stunned silence. Finally, she laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. You said you wanted to give me sons. Looks like you're overachieving. It could be daughters, he pointed out, though his grin was impossibly wide. Twin girls with their mother's spirit. Lord help us all. That evening, they held a celebration for the barn raising. Tables groaned under the weight of food. Children ran between the adults' legs, and fiddle music filled the air. Uncle Thomas, frailer now but still sharp-eyed, held court from a chair by the fire. Never thought I'd see it, he told anyone who'd listen. This place reborn, and Lizzie. He smiled at her. Lizzie blooming like a rose after rain. Uncle Thomas, she protested, but he waved her off. Let an old man speak truth. You two have done something special here. Not just saved the land, but made it thrive, made the community stronger. Sam Morrison raised a glass. To the Holts, and to car land that'll never be taken. The cheer that went up could probably be heard in town. Later, as the party wound down. Eliza and Caleb walked slowly toward the creek. The same creek where he'd made camp that first night, where they'd shared their first real conversation. Regrets? She asked, their old question. Only one, he said seriously. I should have knocked on your door sooner. She laughed, leaning into him. Any sooner and I'd have shot you for sure. Probably true. He stopped walking, turning to face her. Eliza, I need to say something. That first day when I made that ridiculous proposal. Caleb, let me finish. I said I'd give you sons like that was all that mattered, but you've given me so much more, a home, a purpose, a family beyond my wildest dreams. He cupped her face gently. I came here looking for land. I found my whole world. Tears pricked her eyes. You saved my world, literally. We saved each other. He kissed her softly. And now we get to build something new. Together. A kick from within made them both start. Then another. They're active tonight, Eliza murmured. Future ranchers, Caleb said proudly. Already eager to get started. They walked back to the house hand in hand, pausing on the porch to look out over their land. The new barn stood silhouetted against the stars, a testament to what community and determination could achieve. In the distance, cattle lowed contentedly, their herd rebuilt and thriving. I've been thinking about names, Eliza said. If they're boys, Samuel for my father and maybe James for yours. Caleb's voice was thick. He'd have liked that, being acknowledged. He should have acknowledged you. Her voice was fierce, but his loss was my gain. They went inside, where the nursery waited, 2 cribs where there had been one, walls painted with Martha's delicate wildflowers. The house itself seemed to embrace them, no longer the desperate holdout against poverty, but a true home. That night, as they lay together, Caleb's hand splayed protectively over her belly. Eliza thought about the journey that had brought them here, a desperate woman, a bold stranger, an impossible proposal. It should never have worked, but it had. Against all odds, through fire and conflict and sheer stubborn will, it had. Caleb, she whispered. Thank you. for that ridiculous proposal, for not giving up when I tried to run you off, for everything. He pulled her closer. Thank you for saying yes. Eventually. She smiled in the darkness. Best decision I ever made. Second best, he corrected. The best was kissing me that first time. Sealed your fate right there. Arrogant man. You're arrogant, man. Yes, she agreed contentedly. Mine. Outside, a soft rain began to fall. Not the violent storms of the past, but a gentle soaking that would nourish the earth. The sound of it on their new roof was like a benediction, a promise of continued growth and prosperity. In the barn, horses nickered softly. In the house, two people who'd found each other against all odds dreamed of the future, of children's laughter filling the rooms, of seasons turning and crops growing, of a legacy built on love and determination. The car land had been saved, but more than that, it had been transformed. What had once been one woman's desperate stand had become a family's foundation, a community's heart, a testament to the power of taking chances on unlikely proposals. And in the nursery, waiting for their occupants. Two cribs stood ready, symbols of hope, of continuation, of dreams made manifest through courage and faith and the wild, wonderful gamble of saying yes to a giant stranger who knocked on the door with an outrageous offer. The twins would be born with the spring. Martha Henderson serving as midwife while Caleb paced the porch like a caged bear. They would be boys, as it turned out, Samuel Thomas and James Caleb, squalling and strong and perfect. And as Eliza held them for the first time, her husband beside her with tears streaming down his weathered face, she would think of her father's words one more time. Icars don't quit. No, they didn't. They endured. They rebuilt. They loved. And sometimes, when a giant cowboy knocked with an impossible proposal, they said yes and changed everything. The legacy of the Carr Holt Ranch would stretch through generations. The depot bringing prosperity to the whole valley. But in that moment, in the soft spring evening with her sons in her arms and her husband at her side, Eliza wanted nothing more than what she had. A home, a family, a love that had grown from necessity into something deeper than she'd ever dreamed possible. And absolutely no regrets.